Okay, on the John Deere 1944 John Deere A crankshaft, I'm getting my findings together, and this is our last journal, and I'm going to take this one off. I just loosened the nuts up on it. I'm going to tap that down a little bit. I've put the plastic gauge on the bottom. I slid it a piece at the bottom, so it's going to be at the bottom of this bearing, and I'm going to kind of work this down a little bit. I took a couple of shims out, and I'll show you that in a second. I'm going to work that down, and let me try to lift this off without losing my bearings, and I'll show you what I have. I have that on the bearing. I used the red plastic gauge. We'll get this bearing out of here first. We'll have a look at it. The red plastic gauge, minimum on it's 2/1000ths, as I said. So let's have a look here. And we're at about 3/1000ths of an inch, tapering maybe 3.5 or 3/1000ths of an inch. Here's my thoughts on this. I just kind of snugged those down. I didn't torque them, so I might squeeze another half out of it, so I might get 3/1000ths all around, maybe 2.5. Again, I took 2 shims out of each side, and they measure, let's see if I can get them, they're 3/1000ths of an inch a piece, so I took 6/1000ths off each side. Let me click this on. That's showing 9/1000ths. Let me see if I can rehash that. It's 8/1000ths. Let's see if I can get this, because I think these shims are 3/1000ths a piece. These might be 4/1000ths a piece. See, I took 9/1000ths off of that. I took 9 off of one, 8 off the other, and we're still only at 3/1000ths of an inch. So you can imagine what the clearance was on this. That's why my oil pressure is so horrible. This ought to bring my oil pressure right up really nice. You can feel it slightly wore, because the middle part where the oil goes through is slightly higher than the other, so it's very possible that it's like that. But the tractor is, like I said, it's only going to turn 1,000 RPM, so it's not going to be any real big deal. This is going to improve my oil pressure drastically, and the performance of the tractor as well. These shims I took off the PTO side, which is the clutch side. Where did my micrometer go? There it is. We'll have a look at those. And we'll see what we get here. I thought I had 6/1000ths on those. Yeah, I have 6/1000ths on those, so those are 3 apiece. Evidently these are 4 apiece. So I took 8/1000ths off of one side, and so that ought to tighten that up quite nicely. Now the book says tight but not binding, snug but not binding. That's what it is. Snug but not binding. Well, what's snug but not binding? That's where plastic gauge comes in. This ought to provide great clearance, great oil pressure. Guessing and by goshing, when you can go down and spend $5 on something like this and set your clearances, it's great. Remember, for giggles, I checked the original rod bearing. I took 6/1000ths out of it too, and only got 3/1000ths of an inch clearance. So I took 6/1000ths of an inch. So the clearances on the rods were 9/1000ths of an inch, which is quite a bit. With the Model 60 rods and the Chinese bearings, they mic out to 3/1000ths of an inch, which I can live with. Much better than 9/1000ths of an inch. So that ought to clear up our problem quite a bit. A couple things I wanted to show you on this crankshaft. This crankshaft is a drilled crankshaft, and that is to say it has a oil gallery. I wish I had something small. Let me see if I can find something small. Has an oil gallery that's drilled through the crankshaft, if you see. And for some reason it's not going all the way through. It should just go smooth through. I don't see why it's not. I don't understand that. Anyways, it has an oil gallery, so as the first thing that gets oiled is, of course, is the rod bearings, or the main bearings, and then because there's an oil line directly to both sides, and since it has a drilled crank, the oil goes then to the rod journals. Now you want to make sure these are clean, so I'm going to rod these all out and clean them all out, and they should just go one to the next. I don't understand why there's a chicane in there. There should not be a chicane in there of any sorts. And I'm going to have to run a wire in there and see what's going on. But that needs to be clean. See how grody that is? Because if you don't have those oil galleries opened up, your main bearings will get oiled, but your rod bearings will not. And of course the rod bearings have a hole going up to the piston pin, and they oil the piston pin as well. So yeah, there you go. You got to make sure those are clean as well. Something else I wanted to show you. Okay, so now you have brand new bearings. Just say this was a brand new bearing, and you got Plastigage on it. How am I going to get that Plastigage off? Well, you're going to have to be very ginger with it, because if you have a brand new bearing, had some cleaner there. If you have a brand new bearing, you just touch it and you put fingerprints on it. So I'm using some of this Walmart lubricant, and I'm just very carefully scraping it away. Even with your fingernail you can scratch a bearing, but I'm trying to get most of it, and I'm using lubricant on it so it's not going to scratch the bearing so bad. But bearing material is very delicate, so I'm gonna kind of do this, clean it up real good as best I can, and then I'm gonna wipe it off with a clean cloth. And it's pretty forgiving. Bearings are pretty forgiving, especially on this thing. We're not building a race car. If I was building a race car, I would buy a separate set of bearings just to Plastigage, and then I would, and then of course, then I'd put fresh, the exact same bearings that I bought that were fresh, and that way, and it would be in probably dust-free environment, that kind of thing. But we're not building that. We're building a 900 RPM, tractor. Incidentally, a drilled crank is very ahead of its time. I don't think Chevrolet came up with a drilled crank until 1955 when they debuted their 265 V8 that they put in. I think it was a 265. I don't think it was a 283 yet. I think it was a 265. It had an oil filter and a drilled crank. Sort of had an oil filter. Anyways, okay, so we're done there, and I get a little bit more cleaning done, and I should be able to reinstall my crank and my bearings. Before I do that, I'm going to want to clean up the block and clean all the surfaces and whatnot like that. And before I put my crankshaft in, I plan on showing you how to hone a cylinder. So we're going to hone both of those cylinders so the new rings seat well. And I didn't take my block off because there's no real scrapes, and the cylinder don't need to be bored. And so why take that off unless you want to take it off and have it bored. Mine's already been bored 45, and I'm just, this is just an old tractor. I'm not building some kind of hot rod. Anyways, okay, that'll be next. I'll show you honing a cylinder, and we'll go from there. Alright, thank you.